Anu adjusted the ring light one more time, tilting her phone to catch the perfect angle that made her mother's small parlor look like a luxury apartment. The peeling paint on the walls disappeared behind carefully positioned silk scarves she'd borrowed from her neighbor, and the cracked tiles were hidden beneath a strategically placed rug that didn't even belong to her. She pouted at the camera, her lips glossy with makeup she'd bought on credit from a street vendor, and snapped another photo. "Living my best life," she typed beneath the image, adding 7 luxury emojis and 3 hashtags that screamed wealth she didn't have. Within minutes, the likes began flooding in, hundreds of them from people who believed every pixel of the illusion she'd constructed. Her phone buzzed constantly with comments: "Goals, teach me your ways, queen," and "You're living the life we all dream of." But beyond the screen, Anu sat on a wooden stool in the same faded dress she'd worn for 3 days straight, her stomach growling because she'd spent her last 3,000 naira on that ring light instead of food. The truth was brutal and simple. Anu was broke, painfully and desperately broke. She lived with her mother in a face-me, face-you compound in Ajegunle, where 10 families shared one bathroom, and the smell of yesterday's fried fish mixed with today's morning prayers created a symphony of survival. Her mother sold vegetables at Okerin Market, waking up at 4 every morning to catch the early customers, her hands permanently stained with soil and her back bent from years of carrying heavy loads. But on Instagram, Anu was at Anu Diva Forever, a lifestyle influencer with 12,000 followers who believed she lived in Lekki, drove a Mercedes, and spent her weekends at the finest restaurants in Lagos. Every morning, she'd download photos from Pinterest and repost them as her own life, her location tagged at places she'd only seen through car windows when she took Danfo buses through Victoria Island. The comment section was her kingdom, and the likes were her currency, even though they couldn't buy her the plate of jollof rice her belly desperately needed. The message came through on a Tuesday afternoon when Anu was supposed to be helping her mother at the market, but had instead stayed home to create content, which really meant stealing Wi-Fi from her neighbor's unsecured connection and posting more borrowed photos. "Hello, Anu," the message read. "My name is Chief Adeleke. I've been following your page and I'm impressed by your lifestyle. I'm looking for a sophisticated young lady to accompany me to a business dinner on Friday evening. I will pay you 500,000 naira for just one evening." Anu's heart nearly exploded from her chest as she read the amount again and again, her fingers trembling so badly that she almost dropped her cracked phone screen. 500,000 naira! That was more money than her mother made in 6 months of selling vegetables under the hot sun, more money than Anu had ever seen in her entire 23 years of life. She could pay off the rent they owed, fix the leaking roof, buy her mother that sewing machine she'd been dreaming about, and still have enough left to actually live like the Instagram baddie she pretended to be. But something felt wrong, like a cockroach crawling up her spine in the middle of the night. Anu clicked on Chief Adeleke's profile and found exactly what she expected: a middle-aged man with a protruding belly sitting in what looked like an expensive office, surrounded by certificates and photos with politicians whose faces she recognized from the news. His bio said he was a business mogul and philanthropist, which in Lagos could mean anything from legitimate businessman to something far more dangerous. She scrolled through his photos: exotic cars, private jets, champagne bottles that probably cost more than her entire compound, and beautiful women hanging on his arms in every picture, their smiles bright, but their eyes somehow empty. Anu's finger hovered over the reply button, her mind at war with itself. Her mother's voice echoed in her head: "Anu, nothing wey dey this world wey good come free o. If person promise you heaven on earth, then go collect your soul as deposit." But then she thought about the eviction notice the landlord had slapped on their door last week, about the way her mother's cough had gotten worse because they couldn't afford proper medicine, about the shame of always borrowing and never having. Before wisdom could stop her, she typed, "Good afternoon, Chief. I would be honored to attend. What are the details?" Chief Adeleke's response came within seconds, as if he'd been waiting for her reply like a spider watching a fly approach its web. "Excellent. I'll send a car to pick you up on Friday at 6 p.m. Wear something elegant. I want you to look like the queen you appear to be on your page. Send me your address." Anu's heart stopped completely. Her address? The address where she lived in a face me, face you, where the streets had no proper names and the landmarks were the junction where Mama Tunde sells akara and the street after the gutter that floods when it rains. She couldn't possibly give him her real address without destroying the entire illusion she'd built. Her mind raced faster than a Lagos driver trying to beat the traffic light, and then inspiration struck like lightning. She remembered the estate in Lekki she always tagged in her photos, the one she'd walked past once when she took a detour on her way back from her aunt's place. "I'll meet the car at the gate of Pinnacle Estate, Lekki," she typed, her hands shaking so badly that she had to retype the message 3 times before it made sense. The next 3 days were pure chaos, wrapped in desperation and held together by borrowed items. Anu called in every favor she'd ever been owed, visiting friends she hadn't spoken to in months, cousins who barely remembered her name, and even her mother's church members who were known for their generous spirits. From her former classmate Chioma, she borrowed a red evening gown that hugged curves Anu didn't even know she had, the kind of dress that whispered money even though it had been bought on discount at Balogun Market. Her neighbor's daughter lent her a pair of silver heels that were half a size too small but looked expensive enough to pass inspection. Makeup came from her friend who worked at a beauty shop and occasionally borrowed products to practice on clients. Anu's face became her canvas, transformed with contouring, highlighting, and false lashes that made her look like she'd stepped out of a music video. She practiced walking in those heels in her room, stumbling and catching herself on the wall, while her mother watched with worried eyes from the doorway, asking questions Anu deflected with practiced lies. Friday evening arrived with the speed of Judgment Day, bringing with it a nervous energy that made Anu's stomach twist into knots tighter than her mother's wrapper. She told her mother she was going for a business networking event and would be back late, avoiding the older woman's penetrating gaze that seemed to see through walls and lies with equal clarity. Getting to Lekki was an adventure in itself. 2 Danfo buses, 1 keke napep, and finally a final Okada ride that nearly ruined her borrowed dress when the bike splashed through a puddle she hadn't seen coming. She arrived at Pinnacle Estate 30 minutes early, standing awkwardly outside the gate like a thief casing a mansion, trying to look like she belonged while the security guards eyed her with the suspicion Lagos had taught them. When the car finally arrived, it wasn't just any car. It was a black Mercedes S-Class with windows so dark you couldn't see inside, the kind of car that made people stop and stare, wondering which politician or oil magnate sat behind that tinted glass. The driver who stepped out was a muscular man with tribal marks on his face and eyes that had seen things Anu didn't want to imagine. He barely spoke, just opened the back door and gestured for her to enter with a grunt that could have meant anything from welcome to get in before I change my mind. Anu slid into the leather interior that smelled like expensive cologne and new money, her borrowed heels sinking into carpet softer than her bed at home. The car pulled away from the estate gate smoothly, gliding through Lagos traffic like it owned the roads, other drivers parting ways with the kind of respect reserved for people who could cause problems with a single phone call. Anu tried to make conversation. "The car is beautiful. Thank you for picking me up." But the driver responded only with grunts and nods, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror like he expected someone to be following. 20 minutes into the ride, Anu noticed they weren't heading towards Victoria Island where the fancy restaurants were, but instead driving deeper into the mainland towards areas she didn't recognize where the street lights grew dimmer and the roads became rougher. Fear crawled up Anu's throat like bitter bile when the car turned into a street that looked like it had been forgotten by urban development and remembered only by criminals. "Excuse me," Anu's voice came out smaller than she intended, barely louder than a whisper. "I thought we were going to a restaurant. This doesn't look like Victoria Island." The driver's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and what she saw there made her blood freeze in her veins. Not anger, not malice, but something worse. Indifference, the look of a man who had done this many times before and would do it many times again. "Chief Day inside," he said simply, pulling up to a gate that opened automatically as if it had been expecting them, revealing a compound that was surprisingly beautiful inside despite its threatening exterior. Manicured lawns, a fountain that sparkled under security lights, and a mansion that would have impressed Anu under different circumstances.
The front door opened before they even stopped, and a woman stepped out who made Anu's borrowed elegance look like child's play at dress-up. She was tall, dark-skinned, and gorgeous in a way that seemed almost dangerous, wrapped in gold jewelry that caught the light with every movement, and a dress that probably cost more than Anu's entire compound's yearly rent combined. "Welcome, my dear." The woman's smile was warm, but her eyes were calculating, measuring Anu like a tailor measuring cloth before cutting. "I'm Chief's personal assistant, Zinab. You must be Anu. Chief has told me so much about you." She led Anu through a house that smelled like leather and power, past rooms filled with expensive furniture, walls decorated with artwork Anu couldn't begin to understand, and enough electronics to open a store in Computer Village. But there were no other dinner guests, no table set for a business meeting, nothing that matched what Chief Adeleke had described in his message. Anu's Instagram-trained instinct screamed danger, her mind flashing through every Nollywood movie she had ever seen about young girls who went to rich men's houses and never came back the same way or never came back at all. Chief Adeleke sat in what could only be described as a throne, an oversized leather chair in an office larger than Anu's entire home, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookcases filled with books that looked like they'd never been read and certificates that proclaimed his importance to anyone who entered. He was exactly as his photos suggested, middle-aged with a belly that spoke of too many business lunches, dressed in traditional attire that probably cost more than a car, and wearing gold accessories that caught the light every time he moved his fingers. "Anu, my dear." His voice was smooth like palm wine, but with an undertone that reminded her of her mother's warnings about snakes that charmed birds before swallowing them whole. "Please sit. You're even more beautiful in person than on Instagram. Your page is quite impressive. The lifestyle, the elegance, the sophistication. That's exactly what I'm looking for." Anu sat on the edge of the chair across from him, her borrowed dress suddenly feeling too tight, her borrowed heels pinching her feet like punishment for her lies, her borrowed confidence evaporating like rain on hot asphalt. "Let me be direct with you." Chief leaned forward, his fingers forming a staple as he studied her face with eyes that seemed to count every pore, every nervous blink, every lie she had ever told. "Let me be direct with you. I don't actually need you for a business dinner. What I need is much more valuable and much more profitable for you if you are smart." He paused, letting his words sink in like poison through skin. "I run a very successful social media marketing business. We recruit beautiful, ambitious young women like yourself, women who understand the power of image, who know how to sell fantasy to desperate people. Your job would be simple. Continue building your Instagram following, but start promoting our products: weight loss teas, skin lightening creams, investment schemes. You would make posts, create testimonials, convince your followers to buy, to invest, to trust. For every person you recruit, every product you sell, you get a commission. The 500,000 naira I mentioned, that's just your signing bonus. The real money comes after, when you have 50,000 followers, 100,000, when you become an influencer who can move markets with a single post." Anu's stomach twisted as understanding crashed over her like a wave of dirty water. This wasn't a job opportunity. This was a recruitment into something that felt wrong on every level her mother had raised her to recognize. "I don't understand," Anu stammered, even though she understood perfectly, her mind racing through implications that grew darker with every passing second. "You want me to lie to people? To trick them into buying things that might not work? To scam my own followers?" Chief Adeleke laughed, a sound that had no humor in it, only the mechanical noise of a man who'd lost track of right and wrong somewhere along his journey to wealth. "Scam is such an ugly word, my dear. We prefer to call it creative marketing or aspirational selling. Everyone in Lagos is lying about something. You're lying about your lifestyle right now, aren't you? Those photos on your page, that's not your real house, is it? That's not your real car. You've built an entire persona based on deception, and it's brilliant. All we're asking you is that you monetize that skill. Turn your lies into profit instead of just likes." His words cut through Anu like a blunt knife, painful because they were true, because he'd seen through her facade as easily as she had constructed it. Zainab stepped forward then, her smile sharper than before, holding a tablet that she turned toward Anu to show a bank account statement that made Anu's eyes widen until they hurt. This is what one of our top performers makes monthly. 2 million naira, sometimes 3 during good months. Imagine what that could do for you, for your mother who sells vegetables in the hot sun, for your compound that's falling apart. You could move to a real house in Lekki, drive a real car, live the life you've been pretending to live. All it takes is one yes, one signature, one commitment to playing the game everyone else in Lagos is already playing. The tablet showed photos of a young woman about Anu's age, posing in front of luxury cars and exotic vacations that looked painfully real, her smile confident and her eyes empty in a way that reminded Anu of all the women in Chief's photos. And she started just like you, broke, desperate, pretending on Instagram. Now she's one of our most valuable assets. The question is, Anu, are you smart enough to make the same choice, or are you going to walk out of here and go back to your face me, face you, back to borrowing clothes and eating once a day, back to being nothing while pretending to be everything? Anu's mind went into survival mode, the same mode that helped her navigate Lagos traffic, dodge area boys demanding money, and survive in a city that ate the weak and unprepared for breakfast. This is a lot to process, she said carefully, buying time while her brain worked faster than it ever had, calculating exits and possibilities. Can I use the bathroom? I need a moment to think. Chief Adeleke waved his hand dismissively, already confident he'd won, already counting the profit her followers would bring him. Zainab led her down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, finally stopping at a bathroom more luxurious than any room Anu had ever been in, with gold fixtures and marble that gleamed under soft lighting. As soon as the door closed, her hand shook so badly she could barely unlock her phone, her fingers slipping on the screen as she tried to think of who to call, who could help her escape from a situation that felt like quicksand pulling her down with every passing second. Her first instinct was to call her mother, but what could that old woman do against men like Chief Adeleke, who had drivers with dead eyes and assistants who smiled while offering poison? Instead, Anu opened her Instagram, her fingers hovering over the button as a desperate idea formed in her mind like lightning in a storm. She typed quickly, her message raw and honest for the first time since she had created her account. If anything happens to me tonight, I'm at location pin. I came here because I was desperate, because I was pretending to be someone I wasn't, because I thought I could fake my way into a better life. But I've learned that some lies are too dangerous to tell. Some shortcuts lead to places you can never escape from. My name is Anu, I live in Ajegunle, my mother sells vegetables, and everything you've seen on this page is a lie. I'm sorry. Her finger hovered over the post button, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it echoing off the bathroom's marble. And then she pressed it, watching as the post went live to her 12,000 followers, destroying her carefully constructed facade in a single moment of terrifying honesty. The explosion of notifications started immediately, her phone buzzing with comments, shares, and messages as her followers reacted to her confession with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and surprising support. Some called her a fraud and unfunded immediately, but others responded with their own confessions about fake lives and borrowed dreams, creating a thread of honesty that grew longer with every passing second. Anu heard steps approaching the bathroom, heavy and fast, followed by aggressive knocking and voices shouting, "What are you doing in there?" Zainab's voice had lost all her smoothness, replaced by sharp edges that cut through the wooden door. "Chief wants to know what's taking so long." Anu flushed the toilet for authenticity, washed her hands to buy another few seconds, and opened the door with her phone clutched tightly in her hand like a weapon, her post still glowing on the screen with hundreds of shares already, creating a digital trail that couldn't be erased even if they took her phone and threw it in the lagoon. Zainab's eyes went immediately to the phone, her expression changing from annoyed to alarmed in the space of heartbeats as she scrolled the post and its spreading wildfire of shares. She grabbed Anu's arm with bruising force and dragged her back down the hallway toward Chief's office, her borrowed heels stumbling on carpet that felt like quicksand trying to hold her in place. Chief Adeleke's face when he saw the phone, or something Anu would remember for the rest of her life. Rage mixing with calculation, the look of a man who'd been outplayed by someone he'd underestimated, whose careful business model was potentially unraveling because one desperate girl had chosen truth over prosperity. "You stupid girl," his voice no longer smooth but rough as broken concrete. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? That post is spreading like a virus. People are tagging news outlets, asking questions. You've just destroyed months of careful recruitment." His hand raised as if to strike her, and Anu flinched, closing her eyes and preparing for the blow that would teach her the price of honesty in a city built on lies. The blow never came. Instead, the doorbell rang, loud and insistent, followed by aggressive knocking and voices shouting, "Police!
Police! Open the door!" The post had walked faster than Anu could have hoped for. Someone among her followers had contact in the Nigerian police force. Or maybe someone's father worked in law enforcement, or perhaps the viral nature of her confession had attracted attention from authorities already monitoring social media scams. Chief Adeleke's face went through emotions faster than a Lagos traffic light. Rage to fear, to calculation, to resignation, understanding that his operation had been exposed in the most public way possible. Zainab released Anu's arm immediately, both of them suddenly pretending they'd never held her like a prisoner, their faces rearranging into innocent expressions that fooled absolutely no one. The next hours were a blur of police officers, statements given in a station that smelled like old files and stale air, phone calls to her mother who arrived crying and praying and shouting all at once, and finally, the slow dawn of understanding that she was safe, she was free, she had escaped. 3 months later, Anu sat in her mother's parlor, the same small room with peeling paint and cracked tiles. But somehow, it looked different now, felt different now, like home instead of a prison she needed to escape. Her Instagram account had exploded to over 100,000 followers, but not because of fake luxury photos or borrowed dreams. Instead, she posted real content about her real life, helping her mother at the market, showing the struggle and hustle of Ajegunle living, talking honestly about poverty and ambition and the dangerous lies that Lagos taught young people to tell. Brands started reaching out with real sponsorship deals, modest but honest, companies that wanted to connect with authentic voices instead of fake lifestyles. The money wasn't millions, but it was real, earned through truth instead of deception, enough to fix their leaking roof and buy her mother that sewing machine, and even save a little for the future. Chief Adeleke and Zainab were awaiting trial for fraud and attempted kidnapping, their operation dismantled by authorities who'd been looking for evidence for months. Anu's phone buzzed with a message from a young girl. "Thank you for being real. I was about to do something dangerous because I thought I needed to fake my life to be successful. Your story saved me." Anu smiled, typing back a response, no longer pretending to be someone she wasn't, finally understanding that the most compelling story she could tell was the truth, messy, imperfect, but authentically hers. She learned that in a city full of fake Instagram baddies, the bravest thing you could be was real.